She'd survived the destruction of her world, escaped across galaxies, and found sanctuary in a vampire's arms, only to discover that destiny had other plans. When the Alpha King's golden eyes found hers across a crowded market, Aurelia felt the mate bond snap into place like chains forged by the gods themselves, and knew her carefully hidden life was about to burn. Welcome back to my channel, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The silk felt wrong against her fingertips. Aurelia ran her thumb across the merchant's finest blue fabric, watching it catch the morning light, and tried to remember what her mother's ceremonial robes had felt like. Before the fire. Before the screaming. Before Celestra became nothing but ash and memories scattered across the void. 6 months on Earth, and she still couldn't touch certain textures without her skin beginning to glow. "Careful there, miss," the merchant said, eyeing her warily. "That's imported from the Eastern Kingdoms. Expensive." She released the silk immediately, tucking her hands into the folds of her plain brown cloak. The one Keith had given her. The one enchanted to dampen her natural luminescence when her emotions threatened to betray her. Keith. Just thinking his name made her chest ache with longing. He'd left 3 days ago to attend to matters in the Northern Territories, some dispute between his coven and a clan of ancient witches. She missed the weight of his presence, the way his crimson eyes softened when he looked at her, the cool touch of his fingers tracing patterns on her skin in the dark. "My apologies," Aurelia murmured, backing away from the stall. "I was merely admiring." The words died in her throat. She felt it before she saw him. A pull so visceral it stole the breath from her lungs. Like gravity had shifted, reorienting the entire universe around a single point. Him. He stood at the edge of the market square, towering over the crowd. Not quite human in his bearing, too predatory, too ancient, too impossibly alive. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, partially obscuring a face that looked carved from stone and fury. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. Golden. Burning with wolf fire, and something that made her pulse quicken with equal parts terror and recognition. Those eyes found hers. The world exploded into sensation. Heat flooded through her veins like liquid starlight. Her skin began to glow beneath the cloak, soft green light bleeding through the fabric. Every nerve ending in her body screamed a single word in a language older than speech. "Mine." "No," Aurelia breathed. "No, no, no." But the mate bond had already sealed itself into place, wrapping around her soul like golden chains she could feel but couldn't see. The moon goddess's claim, absolute and undeniable. The stranger moved through the crowd like a blade through silk. People parted without conscious thought, some primal instinct warning them away from the apex predator in their midst. He walked with the confidence of someone who'd never been prey, who'd never known fear, who commanded rather than requested. When he stopped 3 paces from her, Aurelia could smell him. Forest and smoke, wild things and winter nights, something fundamentally other that made her want to run and stay in equal measure. "I am Fenris Mooncrest," he said, voice rough as gravel and smooth as honey. "Alpha King of the Western Territories. And you, little star, are my mate." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. A claim. Aurelia's luminescence flared brighter, making the merchant gasp and stumble backward. Around them, the market had gone silent. Every eye turned toward the glowing woman and the Wolf King who looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd never spoken. Her voice cracked. She tried again, forcing steel into her tone. "I don't know what you think you felt, but I assure you, don't." The single word carried enough command to make her spine straighten involuntarily. Fenris took a step closer, and she could see the way his pupils had blown wide, the way his breathing had gone shallow. "Don't lie to me. You felt it too. The bond. The certainty." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she couldn't, his fingers brushed against her wrist. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm. "Your pulse is racing," he murmured, and something in his expression softened. "You're afraid. Of me? Or of this?" Both. The truth escaped before she could stop it. And neither. This isn't possible. It can't be possible. Why? Fenris's thumb traced slow circles on the inside of her wrist, and she felt her treacherous body lean toward him. Because you don't believe in fate? Or because you're already promised to another? The question struck like a physical blow. Aurelia jerked her hand back, cradling it against her chest. How did you? I can smell him on you. Fenris's expression darkened, gold bleeding to amber in his eyes. Old blood. Very old. A vampire, unless I miss my guess. His lips pulled back from his teeth in something too sharp to be called a smile. But vampire bonds can be broken, little star. The mate bond cannot. You're wrong. She took a step backward, then another. The market crowd had begun to whisper, a low susurrus of shock and speculation. You don't understand. What I have with Keith. Keith. The name came out as a growl. Keith Nightborn. She froze. You know him. Every supernatural creature in 5 territories knows him. The vampire king who conquered the Eastern Covens 400 years ago and hasn't been seen in civilized company since. Fenris studied her with new intensity, taking in her luminescent skin, her strange beauty, the way starlight seemed to gather in her hair. What are you to him? Everything, Aurelia whispered. He saved my life. Bound his soul to mine. I am his, and he is mine, and no bond from your goddess can change that. The air itself seemed to thicken. Around them, the bravest market-goers had begun to edge away, sensing the danger in the Wolf King's sudden stillness. Is that so? Fenris's voice had gone deadly quiet. And where is this vampire king now, I wonder? Why isn't he here, protecting what's his? He trusts me to protect myself. Clearly an error in judgment. Fenris smiled, and it was a predator's expression. Because you're standing here, mate bonded to me, while he's off playing politics with witches. Tell me, little star, does he even know what you are? That you're not human? Not vampire? Not his. I'm not yours either, Aurelia shot back, even as her body screamed otherwise. The bond pulled at her like a hook beneath her ribs, trying to drag her into his arms. I don't care what your goddess thinks she's ordained. I am claimed. We'll see. He moved faster than her eyes could track. One moment he stood 3 paces away, the next his hand was cupping her jaw, tilting her face up toward his. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, but she could feel the leashed power in it. The promise of strength that could break stone and bend steel. I will give you one day, Fenris murmured, his breath ghosting across her lips. One day to explain to your vampire that fate has other plans. One day to say your goodbyes. And then, little star, you will come to me. Because this, his thumb brushed across her lower lip, and she hated the way her breath hitched. This is inevitable. You feel it. I feel it. The moon herself has decreed it. And if I refuse? His smile was terrible and beautiful. Then I will take you anyway. But I'd rather you came willingly. He released her and stepped back, and Aurelia nearly collapsed from the sudden absence of his touch. The bond screamed in protest, trying to pull her after him. One day, Fenris repeated. Then he turned and walked away, the crowd parting before him like water before a ship's prow. Aurelia stood in the center of the market square, glowing like a fallen star, and felt her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. She had to find Keith. Now. Before the Alpha King decided one day was too long to wait. The cottage door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. Aurelia pressed her back against the worn wood, chest heaving, heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Her skin still glowed, bright enough to cast dancing shadows across the small room Keith had made into her sanctuary. 6 months of peace, of learning to breathe without fear, of falling asleep in vampire arms and waking to whispered promises. All of it shattered by a pair of golden eyes and a bond she never asked for. No. She pushed off the door, pacing the length of the cottage. No, this is wrong. This is impossible. I'm already bonded. Already claimed. The mate bond can't, it shouldn't. But it had. She could still feel it, a golden thread wrapped around her soul, pulling toward the Western territories. Toward him. Toward Fenris Mooncrest, who looked at her like she was the answer to a question written in his bones. The way Keith looked at her. Oh gods. Keith. Aurelia crossed to the small writing desk, grabbed parchment and ink with trembling hands. She had to reach him. Had to warn him that everything had changed, that some cosmic force had decided to rip their carefully built life apart. Dearest Keith, she wrote, watching ink bleed across paper. Something has happened. Something terrible. I need you to come home immediately. Please. The words blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when the Dominion might still be hunting her. Not when an Alpha King had just claimed her as his mate. Not when she could feel two bonds warring inside her chest, vampire and wolf, shadow and moonlight, both demanding her complete surrender. This is insane, she muttered, crumpling the parchment. I'm losing my mind. That's the only explanation. 6 months of hiding, of constantly looking over my shoulder, and my mind has finally. A knock at the door froze her mid-sentence. Her luminescence flared brighter, cosmic energy crackling across her fingertips. Who's there? A friend. The voice was female, amused. Or at least, not an enemy. May I enter? Standing on doorsteps is terribly undignified for someone of my station. Slowly, Aurelia approached the door. Cracked it open just wide enough to see. A woman stood on the threshold, impossibly beautiful in the way that marked her as distinctly not human. Silver hair cascaded past her waist, and her eyes, one violet, one gold, sparkled with ancient mischief. She wore robes that seemed woven from moonlight itself, and power radiated from her like heat from a forge. Who are you? Aurelia demanded. Isadora. High Witch of the Northern Circles, occasional mediator of supernatural disputes, and most relevantly, the reason your vampire is currently delayed in his return. The witch smiled, showing teeth that were just a fraction too sharp. May I come in? This conversation would be much more pleasant with tea. Aurelia should have said no. Should have slammed the door and reinforced the wards Keith had placed around the cottage. Instead, she found herself stepping back, allowing the witch entry. Isadora swept inside like she owned the place, examining the modest furnishings with an expression somewhere between curiosity and pity. Charming. Very rustic. I suppose when one is fleeing intergalactic war criminals, luxury takes a back seat to survival. Aurelia's blood went cold. How do you know you're the starborn princess everyone's been searching for? Isadora settled into Keith's favorite chair with feline grace. Please, darling. Half the supernatural world has been whispering about Keith Nightborn's mysterious companion. A woman who glows like captured starlight and radiates enough power to make even ancient vampires nervous. It wasn't difficult to put together. She paused. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect the mate bond complication. You know about that too. Fenris is quite vocal when agitated. He burst into my negotiation with Keith this morning, demanding to know why I'd kept him in the Northern Territories when his mate was undefended in the market. Isadora's smile widened. Poor Keith nearly leveled my fortress. Took 3 binding spells and a promise of safe passage to calm him. Aurelia sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. He knows. Keith knows. That you're mate bonded to his oldest rival? Oh yes. He knows. The witch produced a silver flask from her robes, took a delicate sip. He's currently riding hard for these territories. Should arrive by nightfall, assuming his horse survives the pace he's setting. Which is unlikely. This is a disaster. This, Isadora corrected, is unprecedented. And fascinating. You see, I've been studying supernatural bonds for 7 centuries, and never, not once, have I encountered a being capable of sustaining multiple true bonds simultaneously. The vampire blood bond and the werewolf mate bond are fundamentally incompatible. They should be tearing you apart at the cellular level. But you're not just surviving them, you're stabilizing them. Aurelia looked up sharply. What? Your cosmic heritage. Isadora leaned forward, violet and gold eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. You're not just powerful, princess. You're a bridge. A living conduit designed to unite incompatible magics. The question is, were you born this way, or did your people create you? The celestial key. The words echoed in Aurelia's mind, pulling at memories she'd buried. Her mother, dying in the palace as fire rained from the sky, pressing a data crystal into her hands. You are more than you know, my daughter. More than we told you. When the time comes, you'll understand. She'd never activated the crystal. Never wanted to know what final secret her mother had tried to impart. I don't know, Aurelia whispered. I don't know what I am. Then perhaps it's time to find out. Isadora stood, brushing imaginary dust from her moonlight robes. Because two kings are currently on a collision course toward this cottage, and neither strikes me as the sharing type. You need answers, princess. Before this territory becomes a battleground. What do you suggest? The witch's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. There's a repository. Ancient, hidden, protected by wards that would make your vampire's magic look like parlor tricks. It contains knowledge from 1,000 dead civilizations, including, if the legends are true, the Starborn archives. She produced a small crystal that pulsed with inner light. This will grant you entry. One time only. Aurelia stared at the crystal. Why are you helping me? Because I'm tired of cleaning up after supernatural wars, and I suspect you're the key to preventing one. Isadora pressed the crystal into her palm. Also, I have a wager with an oracle about how this particular triangle resolves. Don't disappoint me. Before Aurelia could respond, the witch dissolved into silver mist and vanished, leaving only the scent of moonflowers and the crystal burning cold against her skin. She closed her fingers around it, mind racing. Keith would be here by nightfall. Fenris had given her one day. The Dominion could still be searching. And somewhere in her bloodline was a truth that might explain why two immortal kings were willing to go to war over a refugee princess. The repository. Answers. Then she could face them both. Decision made, Aurelia grabbed her cloak and opened the door. And nearly collided with Fenris Mooncrest standing on her threshold. Going somewhere, little star? He asked, golden eyes gleaming in the fading afternoon light. Her heart stuttered. The mate bond sang with proximity, trying to pull her into his arms. I thought I had one day. You do. He stepped closer, forcing her backward into the cottage. I never said I wouldn't spend that day ensuring you don't run. His gaze swept the room, landed on the crumpled parchment, the packed satchel she'd prepared without conscious thought. Planning to flee? How very predictable. I'm not running. Aurelia lifted her chin, hating how her voice trembled. I'm seeking answers. To what question? Why the moon goddess would be so cruel as to bond me to someone else when I'm already bound heart and soul to another. Something flickered across Fenris's face, too quick to name, too raw to be anything but pain. You think I wanted this? To have my mate claimed by the one vampire in existence I would gladly see turn to ash. You don't even know me. I know you're brave. He moved closer, crowding her space in a way that should have felt threatening, but instead made her breath catch. I know you fled across galaxies to escape destruction. I know you hide your true nature beneath mortal guises. I know the moment I saw you, every empty space inside me suddenly made sense. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers traced the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. I know you're terrified. Of me. Of this bond. Of having to choose. But most of all, you're terrified that part of you doesn't want to refuse me. That's the bond talking Aurelia managed, even as her skin glowed brighter beneath his touch. Not me. Is it? Fenris's thumb brushed across her lower lip, the same gesture from the market. Then why is your heart racing? Why do you lean into my touch like a flower seeking sunlight? Why can I smell your desire mixing with your fear? Stop. The word came out breathless. He did. Immediately. Dropped his hand and stepped back, giving her space to breathe. I'm not a monster, Aurelia. I won't force you. But I also won't let you run from destiny because a vampire got to you first. Keith didn't just get to me. He saved my life. Offered me sanctuary when I had nowhere else to go. Bound his immortal existence to mine without asking for anything in return. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. He gave me hope when I thought I'd lost everything. And I would give you the world. Fenris's voice was rough with suppressed emotion. A pack that would die to protect you. A kingdom where you'd never have to hide what you are. Eternity not as a vampire's bonded, but as a queen in your own right. He paused. But first, you need to understand what you are. What this bond means. What you're truly caught between. He knew. Somehow, he knew about her search for answers. How? I heard the witch. A hint of a smile touched his mouth. These ears aren't just decorative. She's right, you know. You need to understand your nature before you can make an informed choice. His expression turned serious. So I'll make you a deal, little star. Go to your repository. Seek your answers. I'll even escort you, ensure nothing interferes with your search. Why would you do that? Because when you choose me, and you will choose me, I want it to be with full knowledge of what you're accepting. Not because you were frightened or confused or bonded against your will. He extended his hand. One day, Aurelia. Let me spend it proving I'm worthy of the gift the moon goddess gave me. She stared at his outstretched hand, at the golden eyes that watched her with something between hope and hunger. Behind her, through the window, she could see the sun sinking toward the horizon. Keith would arrive by nightfall. The repository held answers her mother died to give her. And the mate bond pulled at her soul like a tide she couldn't resist. Slowly, Aurelia placed her hand in Fenris's. One day, she agreed. Then I choose. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady and impossibly right. One day, he echoed. Make it count, little star. The repository lay 3 hours' ride to the east, hidden within the whispering mountains where reality grew thin and magic pooled like water in ancient stone. Aurelia rode beside Fenris in silence that felt heavier than any words could be. He'd procured horses from somewhere, a midnight stallion for himself and a silver mare that nuzzled her hand with unexpected gentleness. The mate bond hummed between them like a living thing, growing stronger with each passing mile. She tried not to notice the way he sat his horse like he'd been born in the saddle. Tried not to watch the play of fading sunlight across his features, turning his profile into something carved from shadow and desire. Tried not to feel the way her body leaned toward his, drawn by forces older than reason. You're staring, Fenris said without looking at her, a hint of amusement coloring his voice. I'm observing, Aurelia corrected, heat flooding her cheeks. There's a difference. And what have you observed? That you're impossibly beautiful. That the bond makes it hard to breathe when you're this close. That part of me already knows the shape of your soul and recognizes it as home. That you're very confident for someone escorting his supposed mate to find answers that might prove this entire bond is a cosmic mistake. He did look at her then, golden eyes catching the last rays of sun. It's not a mistake. The moon goddess doesn't err. His voice softened. But I understand your fear. You've built a life with him. Given your heart to someone who earned it through sacrifice and protection. And now I appear, demanding you overturn everything based on divine decree. Yet here you are, making demands. Here I am, he agreed, giving you time and space to understand what you're truly caught between. If that's demanding, then I'm guilty as charged. He paused. Tell me about him. Keith. How did a vampire king come to rescue a starborn princess? Aurelia hadn't expected the question. Hadn't expected the genuine curiosity beneath it, unmarred by jealousy or possessiveness. My escape pod was failing. The life support systems had been damaged in the initial attack on Celestra, and by the time I reached this sector, I was minutes from death. She could still remember the cold. The way frost had crept across the pod's viewport. The certainty that she'd fled genocide only to die alone in the void. His ship found me drifting near a dead star. He could have ignored the distress signal, most would have. But Keith brought me aboard, saw I was dying, and made a choice. Her fingers tightened on the reins. He offered his blood. Ancient vampire blood, potent enough to heal mortal wounds. I didn't know it would create a bond. Neither did he. But when I woke 3 days later, I could feel him. His heartbeat, or what passes for one in vampires. His emotions. His presence in my mind like a second consciousness. And you fell in love with your savior. I fell in love with the male who gave me reason to keep fighting, Aurelia said quietly. Who taught me that survival wasn't just about hiding, but about finding joy in small moments. Who held me when the nightmares came and never asked for anything I wasn't ready to give? Fenris was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge of something raw. I can't compete with that. With 6 months of intimacy and trust, I can only offer you what the bond promises, a connection that transcends time and choice. A recognition that goes deeper than memory or circumstance. That's not fair. No, he agreed. None of this is fair. Not to you, not to him, not to me. But fairness stopped mattering the moment our eyes met in that market. He guided his stallion closer until their legs nearly brushed. I felt you, Aurelia. Not just the bond snapping into place, but you. Your loneliness. Your fear. Your desperate hope that maybe, finally, you'd found a place to rest. His hand reached across the space between them, caught hers where it rested on the pommel. I want to be that place for you. Not because some goddess decreed it, but because every instinct I possess screams that you're meant to stand beside me. As my equal. My partner. My queen. The mate bond flared at his touch, sending heat racing up her arm and pooling low in her belly. Aurelia's luminescence brightened involuntarily, bathing them both in soft green light. You don't even know if I can give you children, she blurted, then immediately wanted to sink into the earth. Or if I'm compatible with werewolf physiology. Or if... Fenris laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that transformed his face from severe to breathtaking. Is that what worries you? Errors in biology. He squeezed her hand gently. Little star, I've lived 3 centuries without finding my mate. I'd resign myself to dying alone, passing my crown to my brother's line. If all I get is you, barren, incompatible, glowing like a captured star, I'd count myself blessed beyond measure. Something in her chest cracked open at the raw honesty in his words. Besides, he continued, smile turning wicked, we have eternity to discover our compatibility. I'm quite looking forward to the research process. You're incorrigible. I'm determined. There's a difference. He released her hand as they crested a ridge, and Aurelia saw their destination. The whispering mountains rose before them like ancient gods made stone. And carved into the largest peak, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a doorway that pulsed with power old enough to make her cosmic heritage sing in recognition. The repository, Fenris said, his playful tone evaporating. I've never been inside. Few living creatures have. Whatever answers wait for you there, they've been sealed away for longer than even my oldest memories can reach. Aurelia dismounted, legs shaking for more than just hours in the saddle. The crystal Isadora had given her burned cold against her skin, responding to the repository's call. Fenris swung down beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. I'll wait here. This is your journey. You're not coming? The repository only allows one seeker at a time. Ancient magic, territorial as an old dragon. He caught her chin gently, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. But I'll be right here when you emerge. No matter what you discover. No matter what choice you ultimately make. And if I choose him? Pain flickered across his features, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Then I'll find a way to survive losing the other half of my soul. Wolves are resilient creatures. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, achingly tender. But I'll never stop hoping you'll come back to me. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. His lips brushed her forehead in a kiss, so gentle it made her eyes burn. Go find your answers, little star. I'll be here, keeping the monsters at bay. Aurelia nodded, not trusting her voice. She turned toward the repository entrance, the crystal growing colder with each step. Behind her, she felt Fenris watching. Waiting. The mate bond stretched between them like a golden thread, promising that no matter how far she went, part of him would always be with her. She pressed the crystal against the ancient door. It opened with a sound like stars dying, and Aurelia stepped into darkness older than worlds. The repository was not what she expected. She'd imagined dusty archives, crumbling scrolls, the detritus of dead civilizations. Instead, she found herself standing in a space that seemed to exist outside of normal reality, a vast chamber where walls were made of captured starlight and the floor rippled like water frozen midwave. Welcome, last daughter of Celestra. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Aurelia spun, cosmic energy crackling across her fingers, ready to defend or flee. Peace, child. You are in no danger here. A figure materialized before her, or rather, a hologram so detailed it might as well have been real. A woman with skin that shifted between green and gold, wearing robes that defied description. Her face was Aurelia's face, aged by centuries she'd never live. Mother, Aurelia whispered. A recording of her consciousness, preserved for this moment. The hologram smiled sadly. She knew you would come here eventually. Knew you would need to understand what you are before the weight of destiny crushed you. I don't understand. You are the celestial key, Aurelia. The last of a bloodline engineered 10,000 years ago by the architects, beings of pure cosmic energy who sought to prevent the heat death of the universe. The hologram gestured, and images bloomed in the starlight walls. Civilizations rising and falling. Worlds burning. Species warring until extinction claimed them all. They saw a future where hatred and incompatibility would fracture reality itself. So they created a solution, a bloodline capable of forming bonds across species barriers. A living bridge to unite what should never coexist. Aurelia's legs gave out. She sank to the rippling floor, watching her ancestors' history play out around her. You can sustain multiple bonds because you were designed to. The vampire blood bond, the werewolf mate bond, these are just the beginning. In theory, you could form connections with any sentient species possessing magical capability. The hologram knelt beside her, insubstantial but somehow comforting. You are not caught between two destinies, daughter. You are the bridge between them. Both bonds are real. Both are true. Both are yours to claim. That's impossible, Aurelia breathed. The bonds should be tearing me apart. They would be, if you were ordinary. But your cellular structure rewrites itself to accommodate each new connection. It's why you survived the Dominion's attack when all others perished. Why Keith's blood healed instead of poisoned you. Why the mate bond settled into your soul without destroying the existing vampire bond. The hologram stood, images shifting to show two figures, one dark, one golden. Your mother's final message was this: you were not made to choose, Aurelia. You were made to unite. The vampire and the wolf. Shadow and moon. Two kings, two bonds, one bridge between impossible worlds. But they'll never accept. Won't they? The hologram's smile turned knowing. A vampire who's lived 4,000 years alone, who found purpose in protecting you. A wolf who's waited 3 centuries for his mate, who's willing to give you time and space to choose freely. Both have already demonstrated they'll put your needs above their own desires. She paused. The question isn't whether they can share you. It's whether you're brave enough to claim them both. The chamber began to fade, the hologram dissolving back into starlight. Wait. Aurelia scrambled to her feet. How do I make this work? How do I convince them? You don't convince them, daughter. You show them what you are. What you were meant to be. The celestial key doesn't open one door, it opens them all. The last of the hologram's voice echoed as darkness claimed the space. Trust your heart. Trust your bonds. Trust that love expands rather than divides. And remember, you are not the first of our line to love 2 souls. You are simply the first in 10,000 years. Then Aurelia was standing at the repository entrance again, crystal crumbling to dust in her hand. The sun had set while she was inside, and twin moons rode high in a star-scattered sky. Fenris sat by a small fire, his back to her. The moment she emerged, his head snapped up. He was on his feet in an instant, crossing to her in 3 long strides. You were in there for hours, he said, hands hovering near her shoulders like he wanted to touch, but didn't dare. Are you all right? What did you discover? Aurelia looked up at him, at this impossible male who'd waited patiently while she sought answers that might have condemned him. At the golden eyes that held hope and fear in equal measure. At the face she was beginning to memorize despite knowing she shouldn't. I discovered, she said slowly, that destiny is more complicated than either of us imagined. Before he could respond, before she could second-guess or retreat, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The mate bond exploded like a star-going supernova. Fenris froze for half a heartbeat, just long enough for doubt to creep in, Then his arms wrapped around her waist, and he was kissing her back with 3 centuries of loneliness and longing poured into the joining of their mouths. He tasted like smoke and wild things and promises written in moonlight. His hands spanned her waist, pulling her closer until no space existed between them. When he groaned against her mouth, the sound vibrated through her entire body. Aurelia had kissed Keith hundreds of times. Gentle kisses, passionate kisses, kisses that spoke of eternity and devotion. But this was different. Not better, not worse, but fundamentally other. Like lightning finding ground. Like gravity asserting itself. Like coming home to a place she'd never been. She pulled back, breathless, glowing bright enough to rival the moons. Don't apologize, Fenris said roughly, resting his forehead against hers. Don't you dare apologize for that. I was going to say I understand now. What the bond means. What I am. She traced the line of his jaw with trembling fingers. And I need you to listen very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will sound insane. I'm listening, little star. I'm the celestial key. A living bridge designed to form bonds across incompatible species. The mate bond and the blood bond don't conflict because I was engineered to sustain them both. She took a shaky breath. I'm not choosing between you and Keith, Fenris. I can't. Because my heart, my soul, my very existence was designed to hold you both. Silence stretched between them. Fenris's hands tightened on her waist, then loosened. He stepped back, eyes wide with shock. You're saying that I belong to both of you? That the universe, in its infinite wisdom or cruelty, decided one male wasn't complicated enough for the refugee princess? She laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. I know how it sounds. I know what you must think of me. I think, Fenris interrupted, voice careful, that I need to have a very long conversation with a certain vampire. One that doesn't end in murder. He ran a hand through his hair, looking thoroughly overwhelmed. You're certain? The repository, the answers you found, they're reliable. It was my mother's consciousness. Her final gift to me. He nodded slowly, processing. Then, unexpectedly, he started to laugh. Deep, genuine laughter that shook his broad shoulders. Of course you're cosmically designed to bind incompatible forces. Why would the moon goddess give me a simple mate when she could give me one who comes with the most complicated relationship dynamic in supernatural history? You're not angry? Angry. Fenris cupped her face in both hands, eyes blazing with emotion she couldn't name. Little star, I've waited 300 years to find you. If the price of keeping you is sharing you with a vampire who'll probably spend eternity trying to kill me, then so be it. He pressed another kiss to her forehead, gentle despite the intensity of his words. But we do this right. No secrets, no lies, no one claiming precedence over the other. We figure out how 3 people navigate 2 bonds and 1 heart, or we don't do it at all. Hope bloomed in her chest, fragile as first snow. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. You think I'd walk away from my mate just because she comes with extra complications? I've fought wars, little star. Negotiated peace treaties. Survived 3 centuries of loneliness. I can survive sharing you with Keith Nightborn. A sound like breaking branches made them both spin toward the forest. Keith emerged from the tree line like vengeance given form. His crimson eyes blazed with fury, and shadows writhed around him like living things. He'd clearly ridden hard, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his expression murderous. Get your hands off my mate. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Fenris didn't release Aurelia, but he didn't take an aggressive stance either. We need to talk, vampire. All 3 of us. The only conversation we're having is the one where you explain why you're touching what's mine before I rip your throat out and use it as a warning to other dogs. Keith, Aurelia tried to step forward, but both males moved to block her simultaneously. They glared at each other, then at her, then back at each other in a moment of such perfect synchronization it might have been funny under different circumstances. She has something to tell you, Fenris said, voice strained with the effort of remaining calm. About what she discovered in the repository. About what she is. Keith's gaze flicked to Aurelia, and she saw the hurt beneath the fury. The betrayal. You went into the repository with him? Let him touch you? Kiss you? His voice cracked on the last word. 6 months, Aurelia. 6 months I've protected you, loved you, kept you safe. And the moment I leave you, I'm the celestial key, she interrupted, before this could spiral into violence. I can bond with multiple partners simultaneously because I was genetically engineered to bridge incompatible species. The mate bond and the blood bond are both real, both true, both permanent. Keith froze. What? She's saying, Fenris supplied, looking remarkably calm for someone facing down an enraged vampire, that we're both bonded to her. Both legitimate. Both permanent. And if we want to keep her, which I certainly do, we need to figure out how to coexist. The Vampire King stared at them both like they'd lost their minds. Then, slowly, he started to laugh. Dark, slightly unhinged laughter that made even Fenris shift uncomfortably. Perfect, Keith said, shadows still writhing around him. The first woman I've loved in 4,000 years, and she's cosmically designed to be shared. With a werewolf. With Fenris Mooncrest, of all that he cut himself off, dragging a hand through his dark hair. This is either divine comedy or cosmic punishment. Can it be both? Aurelia ventured. 2 sets of supernatural eyes turned to her. One gold, one crimson. Both burning with emotion too complex to name. Come here, Keith said softly, dangerously. She went, because the blood bond pulled at her just as strongly as the mate bond did. When she reached him, he buried his face in her hair, breathing her in like she was the last source of oxygen in a dying world. You smell like wolf, he murmured against her skin. And moonlight. And changes I'm not prepared to accept. I'm still yours, Aurelia whispered. That hasn't changed. But you're also his now. Keith pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. And you want to be? I can feel it through our bond. The pull toward him. The rightness of it. His jaw clenched. I hate it. Every fiber of my being wants to tear him apart for touching you. But I also love you enough to want you happy, even if happiness means sharing you with a male I'd rather see destroyed. Fenris stepped closer, careful not to make any sudden movements. For what it's worth, the feeling is mutual. I'd rather feast on silver than share my mate. But I've spent 300 years alone, vampire. I won't waste whatever time the universe gives me by letting pride destroy something precious. The 3 of them stood in tense silence, 2 bonds pulling at Aurelia from opposite directions, trying to hold together something that should have been impossible. Ground rules, Keith said finally. If we're doing this, and I haven't agreed to anything yet, we do it with absolute transparency. No claiming precedence. No territorial disputes. No using her as a pawn in whatever centuries-old rivalry we're supposed to be perpetuating. Agreed, Fenris said immediately. And we protect her together. From the Dominion, from supernatural politics, from anything that might threaten her. Obviously. Keith's expression softened fractionally. And she gets the final say in everything. Boundaries, time, affection, all of it. This only works if she's the one in control. They both looked at her. Aurelia felt the weight of 2 bonds, 2 destinies, 2 impossible males who'd somehow agreed to attempt the unthinkable. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't have a manual for navigating 2 relationships simultaneously. But I know, her voice strengthened, that I care for you both. That both bonds feel right in ways I can't explain. And that I'd rather try and fail spectacularly than spend eternity wondering what might have been. Then we try, Fenris said simply. We try, Keith echoed, sounding like each word cost him dearly. And there, beneath twin moons and scattered stars, 3 people bound by impossible magic made a pact that would either save or destroy them all. Living with 2 immortal kings turned out to be far more complicated than any cosmic engineering could prepare her for. The first week was a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance and territorial posturing. Keith claimed the cottage's master bedroom, his right, he argued, since he'd given it to her in the first place. Fenris built a secondary dwelling within sight of the cottage, close enough to respond to threats, but far enough to give the vampire breathing room. Aurelia split her time between them, feeling like a rope in a cosmic tug-of-war. Keith was gentle in his reclamation. He'd pull her into his arms at night, pressing cool kisses to her temple while shadows danced across the ceiling. "Tell me he treats you well," he'd murmur against her hair. "Tell me you're happy, even if it destroys me to hear it." And she'd tell him about Fenris's humor, his unexpected tenderness, the way the mate bond sang when they touched. She'd feel Keith's arms tighten around her, his ancient heart breaking in slow motion, and hate herself for loving someone else while loving him. But then morning would come, and she'd walk to Fenris's dwelling to find him preparing breakfast, something Keith never needed to do. The wolf would light up at her presence, pulling her into his warmth, and the mate bond would settle into contentment that felt like coming home. "Does he hold you too tight?" Fenris asked one morning, fingers tracing patterns on her wrist. "You had marks yesterday. Faint, but there." "He's afraid," Aurelia said softly. "Afraid of losing me. Afraid the mate bond will eventually overshadow what we built together." "And you? What are you afraid of?" She looked up at him, at eyes that saw through her carefully constructed composure. "That I'll hurt you both so badly you'll come to hate me. That loving two people makes me selfish. That this fragile balance we're attempting will shatter and leave nothing but ruin." Fenris pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Then we don't let it shatter. We communicate. We adapt. We figure out what works for three people who shouldn't fit together, but somehow do." He paused. "Though I'll admit, sharing you is considerably harder than I anticipated." "Harder how?" "Every instinct I possess screams to claim you completely. To mark you, bind you, ensure every creature within 100 territories knows you're mine." His arms tightened around her. "But you're not just mine. You're also his. And I have to swallow my wolf's possessiveness and remember that you chose this. That you need both of us." Aurelia tilted her face up, brushing her lips against his jaw. "You're doing better than I expected." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Low bar, little star. Very low bar." But the fragile peace couldn't last. The Dominion found her on a rain-soaked evening in the second week. Aurelia had been gathering herbs from the forest edge, a simple task that shouldn't have required an escort. Keith was meeting with his coven regarding territorial disputes. Fenris was handling pack business 2 valleys over. She was alone for the first time in weeks, relishing the solitude despite the bond's constant tug toward their anchors. She didn't sense the threat until a blade pressed against her throat. "Princess Aurelia of Celestra." The voice was mechanical, emotionless. "Surrender yourself peacefully, and this world remains intact." Her cosmic energy flared instinctively, green light blazing bright enough to illuminate the gathering dusk. 3 Dominion soldiers materialized from cloaking fields, their armor designed to withstand planetary-level destruction, their weapons capable of atomizing city blocks. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Aurelia said, proud her voice didn't shake despite terror flooding her veins. "You destroyed my home. Murdered my people. I'd rather die than let you weaponize me. Death is not on offer." The lead soldier tilted his head, scanning her with instruments built into his helmet. "Curious. You've bonded with native species. 2 separate magical signatures intertwined with your cosmic essence." A pause. "The architect's work?" "My work," Aurelia corrected. "My choice. My bonds. Then we'll extract them. Our scientists will enjoy studying how starborn physiology integrates incompatible magic systems." He raised his weapon. "You have 5 seconds to comply before we begin destroying settlements." 5. Both bonds ignited simultaneously. Through the blood bond, she felt Keith's sudden rage, his instant awareness of her danger. Through the mate bond, she felt Fenris's wolf surge forward with primal fury. They were coming. Both of them. But they were too far away. She'd be dead or captured before either arrived. 4. Aurelia's cosmic energy exploded outward in a wave that sent all 3 soldiers flying. She ran, drawing them away from the village, away from innocent humans who had no part in galactic war crimes. The forest became a battlefield. Energy blasts carved through ancient trees, setting them ablaze. Aurelia dodged and wove, using every technique her mother had drilled into her before Celestra fell. She was powerful, perhaps the most powerful starborn ever born, but the Dominion soldiers were trained, equipped, and utterly without mercy. A blast caught her shoulder, spinning her around. She crashed into a tree, tasting blood. Her vision swam, cosmic energy flickering as pain overwhelmed her concentration. The lead soldier approached slowly, confidently. "You cannot win, princess. You never could. Your people's extinction was inevitable. Your capture is inevitable. Fighting only." Shadows erupted from the ground like spears. Keith materialized between Aurelia and the soldiers, eyes blazing crimson, fangs fully extended. He looked like death incarnate, ancient, terrible, and absolutely furious. "You made," he said, voice dropping to sub-zero temperatures, "a catastrophic error in judgment." He moved faster than her eyes could track. One moment standing still, the next his hand had punched through the lead soldier's chest armor, emerging on the other side holding what might have been a power core. The soldier collapsed. Before his companions could react, a massive wolf burst from the tree line. Fenris in his true form, easily the size of a warhorse, for darker than midnight, eyes burning gold. He slammed into one soldier with enough force to shatter stone, jaws closing around the helmet with a crunch of breaking metal. The third soldier aimed his weapon at Aurelia. She threw up a shield on pure instinct, cosmic energy forming a barrier that absorbed the blast. Then Keith was there, ripping the weapon away, moving with the casual brutality of someone who'd spent 4,000 years perfecting violence. Fenris shifted mid-leap, landing in human form beside Aurelia. "Are you hurt?" She looked down at her burned shoulder, the blood soaking through her dress. "I've been better." He growled, low and dangerous, then turned to Keith. "We need to get her to safety. Now. If the Dominion found her, they'll send reinforcements." "Agreed." Keith appeared beside them, shadows still writhing around him like agitated serpents. His gaze swept over Aurelia's injuries, and something in his expression cracked. "This is my fault. I should have been here." Should have. Should have what? Kept her locked in a cage. Fenris shook his head. "The Dominion would have found her eventually. At least now we know they're actively searching. Which means we can't stay here." Keith lifted Aurelia carefully, mindful of her injuries. Through their bond, she felt his terror, his rage, his crushing guilt. "We need to move. Find somewhere defensible. Somewhere." "My pack's stronghold," Fenris interrupted. "In the northern reaches. The wards there are ancient, powerful enough to deflect orbital bombardment." "Your territory?" Keith's expression turned skeptical. "Surrounded by wolves who'll see me as prey? Surrounded by wolves who'll die to protect their alpha's mate." Fenris met the vampire's gaze steadily. "I know we're not allies, bloodsucker. But we both want her safe. Can we at least agree on that?" Keith looked down at Aurelia in his arms. At the pain etched across her features, the way her luminescence flickered weakly. "We move tonight. I'll gather what we need from the cottage. You arrange transport and inform your pack. We meet at the crossroads in 1 hour." "Done." Fenris reached out, fingers brushing against Aurelia's cheek with devastating gentleness. "Stay alive, little star. That's an order from your alpha." She managed a weak smile. "So commanding. You have no idea." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then shifted and vanished into the forest. Keith carried her back toward the cottage, moving with supernatural speed that turned the world into a blur of shadow and rain. Through their bond, she felt his turmoil, the desperate need to keep her close warring with the knowledge that he couldn't protect her alone. "I hate this," he murmured against her hair. "Hate needing him. Hate that his territory is safer than anywhere I could take you. Hate that you're hurt and I couldn't prevent it." "Keith, let me finish." They'd reached the cottage. He laid her gently on the bed, then knelt beside her, taking her uninjured hand in both of his. "I've loved you from the moment I pulled you from that wreckage. Loved you through every careful step of our courtship, every night you fell asleep in my arms, every morning I woke to find you still there." His voice cracked. "And I will love you even as I watch you fall for him. Even as the mate bond pulls you closer to a male I've hated for centuries. Even as this fragile arrangement we've made tears me apart piece by piece." Tears streamed down Aurelia's face. "I never wanted to hurt you. I know. He pressed a kiss to her palm, cool lips lingering against her skin. But love without pain is just comfort. And you, my starlight, have never been about comfort. You've been about impossibility made flesh. About hope I didn't know I needed. About showing an ancient vampire that even 4,000 years of loneliness can end if you're brave enough to save glowing princesses from the void. He rose, gathering supplies with efficient movements. Clothes, weapons, the few possessions she'd accumulated during their time together. All the while, Aurelia watched him through the blood bond, feeling his heartbreak and his resignation and his stubborn, unyielding devotion. "Keith," she said softly, "thank you for loving me enough to let me love someone else." He paused in his packing, shoulders tight with emotion. "Don't thank me yet, Starlight. We're about to spend extended time in close quarters with a werewolf who makes my fangs ache. I make no promises about continued civility. I'll take what I can get." His laugh was dark and genuine. "That's my girl. Always optimistic in the face of certain disaster." An hour later, they met Fenris at the crossroads. The wolf had procured horses, supplies, and, improbably, a traveling cloak in deep blue that matched Aurelia's dress. "For the journey," he said, settling it around her shoulders. His fingers lingered at her throat, adjusting the clasp. "You'll be cold. The northern reaches earn their name." Keith watched the interaction with barely concealed tension, but said nothing. He simply mounted his horse and extended a hand to help Aurelia up behind him. She hesitated, caught between them. The blood bond pulled her toward Keith, toward familiar comfort and established devotion. The mate bond pulled her toward Fenris, toward something new and terrifying and impossibly right. "Ride with him," Fenris said quietly, seeing her indecision. "You're injured. You need the support. I'm not so insecure I can't share you for a few hours." The lie was transparent. She could feel his wolf's protest through the bond, the way it wanted her closer, wanted to guard and protect and claim. But he was trying. They both were. Aurelia accepted Keith's hand and settled against his chest, his arms coming around her with possessive gentleness. Through the bond, she felt his smug satisfaction at this small victory. "Ready?" Fenris asked, already astride his stallion. "As will ever be," Keith replied. And they rode north, three souls bound by impossible magic, fleeing into the unknown while the Dominion searched and the fragile balance between them threatened to shatter with every mile. They rode for 3 days. The journey was tense, punctuated by brief stops and careful avoidance of populated areas. Fenris ranged ahead, scouting for threats. Keith held Aurelia close, monitoring her injuries through the blood bond and feeding her his strength when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. At night, they made camp in defended positions. Fenris would take first watch, Keith second, both unwilling to leave her unguarded even for a moment. Aurelia slept between them literally when tents proved scarce and tried not to think about how natural it felt to have two bodies bracketing hers, two hearts beating in concert with her own. On the third evening, they crested a ridge and saw Fenris's stronghold. It rose from the mountainside like a fortress born from living stone. Massive walls carved with ancient runes that pulsed with protective magic. Watchtowers where wolves in both forms stood guard. And at the center, a great hall that had witnessed centuries of pack history. "Welcome," Fenris said, pride evident in his voice, to Silver Peak. Home of the Mooncrest Pack, seat of the Western Territories, and the safest place on this continent for one very troublesome starborn princess. Aurelia stared at the stronghold, feeling the power emanating from those ancient wards. "It's beautiful. It's defensible," Keith corrected, though she caught a note of grudging respect in his voice. Even the Dominion would think twice before assaulting this position. They'd think twice, then attack anyway. Fenris dismounted, extending a hand to help Aurelia down. "But they'd pay dearly for it. And they'd give us time to evacuate her through the mountain passages." He glanced at Keith. "Assuming you can tolerate being surrounded by wolves for an extended period." "I've tolerated worse." The vampire slid from his horse with liquid grace. "Though I expect certain accommodations. Private quarters. Blood supply. Assurance your wolves won't try to mount my head on their wall as a trophy." I'll inform them you're under my protection. As Aurelia's companion. The word clearly pained Fenris. They won't move against you unless you give them cause. How magnanimous. I try. They glared at each other with the kind of intensity that suggested centuries of bad blood couldn't be erased by a few days of forced cooperation. Aurelia stepped between them, placing a hand on each of their chests. Through both bonds, she felt their turmoil, their resentment, their desperate attempt to coexist for her sake. Thank you, she said softly. Both of you. I know this isn't easy. I know every instinct you possess is screaming to eliminate the competition. But you're trying. For me. And that means everything. Fenris covered her hand with his, eyes softening. We should get you inside. You need proper healing, rest, and introduction to the pack. He paused. Fair warning, they're going to be curious about their alpha's mate. Especially one who glows and comes with a vampire attachment. I'll try to be charming, Keith said dryly. Please don't. I've seen your version of charm. It usually ends in bloodshed. Despite everything, Aurelia laughed. The sound seemed to break the tension, earning matching looks of surprise from both males. What? She asked innocently. Nothing, Fenris said, a smile tugging at his lips. Just storing that sound away for darker days. Agreed, Keith murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Your laughter is a gift, Starlight. Even when we don't deserve it. They entered Silver Peak together, two ancient enemies and the woman who somehow loved them both and hoped the wards would hold against whatever storm was coming. Because the Dominion had found her once. They would find her again. And next time, they'd bring an army. The Mooncrest pack was not what Aurelia expected. She'd imagined savage warriors, territorial and violent. Instead, she found families. Children playing in the courtyard under their parents' watchful eyes. Elders sharing stories by massive hearths. Young wolves training with wooden weapons, learning discipline alongside strength. They stared at her, of course. The glowing alien princess their alpha had claimed. But the stares held curiosity more than hostility, wonder more than judgment. She's beautiful, a young girl whispered to her mother, loud enough for supernatural hearing to catch. Like captured moonlight. She's bonded to a vampire, an older male growled. An abomination. Our alpha deserves. Silence. Fenris's command cut through the courtyard like a blade. He'd shifted to his more authoritative bearing, shoulders back, eyes hard, every inch the king who'd ruled these territories for 3 centuries. Aurelia is my mate. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Are we clear? Silence answered him. Then, slowly, the pack dropped to one knee in a gesture of acknowledgement that made Aurelia's chest tighten. We welcome the Alpha's mate, they said in unison. We protect the Alpha's mate. We honor the Alpha's mate. Fenris's expression softened fractionally. Rise. And someone show our guests to their quarters. The East Wing. Adjacent rooms with a connecting door. Several wolves exchanged meaningful glances at that arrangement, but none dared comment. Keith stood slightly apart from the pack, shadows pooling at his feet, crimson eyes taking in every exit and potential threat. He looked utterly out of place among the wolves, too pale, too still, too fundamentally other. A young male approached him, bold or foolish enough to get within striking distance. You're the Vampire King. I am, Keith replied, voice carefully neutral. The one who conquered the Eastern Covens. Also me. The one who once killed an entire pack for trespassing in his territory. Keith's expression went dangerously blank. That pack was slaughtering human villages for sport. I stopped them. Permanently. He paused. If you're planning to avenge them, I should warn you, I'm considerably older and more irritable than I was 300 years ago. The young wolf bared his teeth. I'm planning to inform you that my sister died in that pack. She was 7 years old. Caught in the massacre because she'd run away from home and gotten lost in the wrong territory. He extended his hand. Thank you. For ending them before they could hurt anyone else. Keith stared at the offered hand for a long moment, then clasped it briefly. I'm sorry for your loss. No child should die in someone else's war. Agreed. The wolf stepped back. You're not welcome here, vampire. But you're not our enemy either. As long as you protect our alpha's mate, we'll tolerate your presence. How generous. Despite the sarcasm, Aurelia felt Keith's surprise through their bond. He'd expected immediate hostility, not grudging acceptance. Fenris appeared at her side, hand settling on the small of her back. Let me show you to your rooms. You need rest, proper healing, and probably time away from politics and posturing. That last one sounds impossible given my current circumstances, Aurelia said, but allowed him to guide her toward the great hall. Keith followed a careful 3 paces behind, and she felt his attention on her like a physical weight. The quarters Fenris had arranged were luxurious by any standard. 2 large rooms connected by a heavy wooden door that could be locked from either side. Rich furs covered the beds, fires crackled in stone hearths, and windows looked out over mountain valleys that stretched toward distant horizons. "This is yours," Fenris said, showing her into the first room. "And the vampire gets the adjoining space." He paused, something uncertain crossing his features. "Unless you'd prefer different arrangements. I don't want to assume." "This is perfect," Aurelia interrupted gently. She could feel Keith's presence in the next room through their bond, could sense Fenris's wolf wanting him closer through the mate bond. "Thank you. For all of this. For protecting me, bringing me here, trying to make this work despite how much it must cost you." "It costs," he admitted, voice rough. "Every time I smell him on you. Every time I feel you thinking about him through our bond. Every moment I'm forced to share what should be mine alone." He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "But losing you would cost more. So I adapt. I compromise. I learn to exist in a reality where my mate loves someone else." "Fenris, don't apologize." He pressed her palm against his chest, over his heart. "You didn't choose this any more than I did. The celestial key, the bonds, the cosmic engineering, none of it was your decision. You're just trying to survive the hand fate dealt you." His thumb traced circles on her wrist. "But know this, little star, I will never stop wanting all of you. Every piece. Every moment. Every breath. The wolf in me doesn't understand compromise. It only understands mate, mine, forever." He kissed her then, deep and claiming and desperate. Aurelia melted into it, the mate bond singing with rightness even as guilt churned in her stomach. When he pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. "Sleep," Fenris said roughly. "Heal. I'll have food sent up. Tomorrow we'll discuss defenses and what to do when the Dominion inevitably finds this place." He stepped toward the door, paused. "And Aurelia? Thank you. For choosing to stay. For not running when this got complicated. For being brave enough to attempt the impossible." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with a racing heart and a bond that hummed with satisfaction. She turned to find Keith standing in the connecting doorway, shadows writhing around him like agitated serpents. "You kissed him," Keith said quietly. "I felt it through our bond. The pleasure. The guilt. The way your body responded to his touch." "Keith, I'm not angry." He crossed to her slowly, each step measured. "Well, I am angry. Furiously, violently angry at a cosmic joke that decided my mate should love a wolf. But not at you. Never at you." He cupped her face gently. "I knew what I was agreeing to when we made this arrangement. Knew I'd have to feel you falling for him. Knew it would destroy me piece by piece. Then why agree to it? Because the alternative was losing you completely." He rested his forehead against hers, breathing her in. "And I am selfish enough, desperate enough, to take half of you over none of you. Even if it means enduring torture every time you're in his arms." Aurelia's eyes burned with tears. "I hate this. Hate that loving both of you means hurting both of you. That there's no version of this where everyone's happy. Then we learn to live with unhappiness." Keith's smile was sad and ancient. "For 1,000 years teaches you that happiness is fleeting. But love real, bone-deep love that endures. Even when it's complicated. Even when it destroys you." He kissed her softly, sweetly, nothing like Fenris's claiming kiss, but equally devastating. Through the blood bond, she felt his love, his pain, his stubborn refusal to let go. When they parted, Keith guided her to the bed, tucking furs around her with careful attention. "Sleep, Starlight. I'll keep watch." The wolf may think his wards are impenetrable, but I've lived long enough to know nothing is truly safe. Will you stay? The question came out small, vulnerable. Until you tell me to leave. He settled into a chair by the fire, shadows pulling close like a protective cocoon. I'm not going anywhere. Aurelia fell asleep watching him, feeling the dual pull of bonds that demanded her attention and affection in equal measure, and wondering how long they could sustain this before something broke. She woke to screaming. Not human screaming, the high-pitched wail of alarm wards being breached. Aurelia bolted upright, cosmic energy already crackling around her fingers. Keith was at the window in an instant, crimson eyes scanning the darkness. Dominion ships. 6 of them. They've found us. The connecting door slammed open. Fenris stood there in half-shifted form, claws extended, eyes blazing gold, fur rippling across his skin in patches. We need to evacuate. Now. The wards will hold for maybe an hour before they adapt their weapons to break through. Where do we go? Aurelia scrambled from the bed. If they found us here, they can find us anywhere. Not anywhere. Fenris grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door. There's a place. Deep in the mountain's heart. Older than my pack, older than this stronghold. A sanctuary built by the first werewolves to walk these lands. He glanced at Keith. Vampire. I'm coming. Keith materialized beside them, shadows already forming into weapons. Someone has to ensure you wolves don't get yourselves killed through sheer recklessness. They ran through corridors filled with pack members mobilizing for war. Children being rushed to safe rooms. Warriors donning armor and taking positions. Everyone moving with the precision of those who'd trained for exactly this scenario. Alpha. A scarred female wolf appeared beside them. The ships are targeting the east wall. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they punch through. Evacuate all non-combatants through the mountain passages, Fenris ordered. Combatants hold the line as long as possible, then fall back in organized retreat. No heroics. We're buying time, not winning battles. Yes, Alpha. She vanished into the chaos. They descended into the stronghold's lower levels, through tunnels carved from living stone. The air grew colder, thicker with ancient magic that made Aurelia's cosmic heritage resonate. How much farther? Keith asked, moving with preternatural grace through the darkness. Another quarter-mile. Fenris's grip on Aurelia's hand tightened. The sanctuary entrance is hidden. Even my pack doesn't know exactly where, only that it exists, and our alphas have passed down the secret for generations. An explosion rocked the stronghold above them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere distant, wolves howled in pain or fury. They're through the wards, Keith said grimly. Then we move faster. Fenris shifted fully, his massive wolf form suddenly filling the tunnel. He crouched, allowing Aurelia to climb onto his back. Hold tight. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his dark fur. He smelled like forest and wild things and home. Keith kept pace beside them as Fenris ran, his ancient strength allowing him to match a wolf's speed without apparent effort. Through both bonds, Aurelia felt their determination, their fear for her, their absolute refusal to let the Dominion take her. The tunnel ended abruptly at a solid stone wall. Dead end, Keith observed. Hidden entrance. Fenris shifted back to human form, supporting Aurelia as she slid from his back. He pressed his palm against the stone, and Aurelia felt power surge through him, alpha magic, ancient and absolute. The stone melted away, revealing a passage that glowed with soft silver light. The sanctuary, Fenris breathed. I've never actually seen it. Only knew it existed from my father's stories. They entered cautiously. The passage opened into a vast cavern that took Aurelia's breath away. It was beautiful. Silver veins ran through the walls like frozen rivers, pulsing with magic that predated civilization. A pool of crystal-clear water sat at the chamber's center, its surface perfectly still. And carved into every available surface were runes, wolf runes, vampire runes, and others she didn't recognize. What is this place? Aurelia whispered. Keith was examining the runes with scholarly intensity. A neutral ground. Built before vampires and werewolves became enemies. before supernatural species divided into factions and territories. His finger traced one particularly complex symbol. This is a peace sanctuary, a place where natural enemies could meet without threat of violence. My ancestors built it with vampire allies, Fenris said, wonder in his voice. Before the Great Schism, when our kind still remembered how to coexist. He turned to Keith. There's a story legend, really, about how the first Alpha and the first Vampire King were bonded. Not romantically, but as brothers. They built this place as testament to what could be achieved through cooperation rather than conflict. Another explosion shook the mountain, closer this time. They're tearing through the stronghold, Keith said. We have minutes at best. Aurelia stepped toward the pool at the chamber's center, drawn by something she couldn't name. The water surface began to ripple despite the lack of wind, and images formed in its depths. She saw Celestra before its fall. Saw her mother in the royal palace, saw herself as a child learning to control her cosmic gifts. Then the images shifted, showing the Dominion's attack, the burning cities, the refugees fleeing through portals to escape extinction. But the visions didn't stop there. She saw futures, possible futures. In one, she surrendered to the Dominion and they weaponized her power, using it to conquer galaxy after galaxy until nothing remained but ash and empire. In another, she died defending Earth, her bonds shattered, Keith and Fenris torn apart by grief and renewed hatred. But there was a third future. Faint, difficult to see, but there. In it, she stood between Keith and Fenris, both bonds blazing bright. Her cosmic energy merged with vampire shadow and wolf moonlight, creating something new. Something powerful enough to make the Dominion reconsider their attack. Something that could unite rather than divide. The celestial key, she murmured, understanding flooding through her. I'm not just meant to bridge Keith and Fenris. I'm meant to show what's possible when impossible forces unite. To prove that cooperation trumps conquest. She turned to face them both. I know how to stop the Dominion. But it requires trusting me completely. Trusting each other. And doing something that will either save us or destroy us all. What do you need? Fenris asked immediately. Your alpha magic. She looked at Keith. And your ancient vampire power. Both of you, channeled through me, amplified by the sanctuary's neutral ground. She took a shaky breath. I'm going to show the Dominion exactly why they should fear the celestial key. That's insane, Keith said flatly. Channeling that much power through a mortal frame could kill you. I'm not mortal. I'm starborn. Aurelia extended her hands, one toward each of them. And I'm bonded to two of the most powerful supernatural beings on this planet. If anyone can survive this, it's me. And if you're wrong? Fenris's voice was rough with barely suppressed fear. Then at least I die trying to save something rather than running forever. She smiled sadly. Trust me. Please. Both of you. They exchanged a look, the kind that carried centuries of enmity and new, fragile understanding. Then Keith took her left hand. If you die, I'm following you into whatever afterlife claims you. Fair warning. Fenris took her right hand. And I'll fight any gods necessary to bring you back. Just so we're clear. Noted. Aurelia closed her eyes, reaching deep into both bonds. Now let me show the Dominion what happens when they threaten someone loved by both darkness and moonlight. She pulled. Power flooded into her, vampire shadow and wolf moonlight merging with her cosmic essence. It should have torn her apart. Should have been fundamentally incompatible. But the celestial key was designed for exactly this impossible fusion. Her body became a conduit. A bridge. A living weapon forged from three impossible magics. She rose into the air, supported by forces that defied physics. Her skin blazed with light bright enough to illuminate the entire cavern. And through the bonds, she felt Keith and Fenris pouring everything they had into her, trusting her with power that could level continents. Now, she whispered, let's remind them why the Starborn were feared. Aurelia released the combined power in a single, focused pulse. It tore through stone, through wards, through the Dominion ships hovering above the stronghold. Not destroying them, she wasn't trying to kill, but shorting out every system, every weapon, every piece of technology that allowed them to function. The ships fell from the sky like broken toys. And across every Dominion communication channel, her voice rang out, amplified by magic, carrying the weight of 3 impossible powers merged into one. I am Princess Aurelia of Celestra, last of the Starborn, the celestial key incarnate. I am bonded to powers you cannot comprehend, protected by forces you cannot defeat. Leave this world. Leave its people. Or discover exactly why my ancestors were the only species your empire ever feared. The ships that could still maneuver fled. Those that couldn't were carefully, methodically destroyed by pack warriors who'd watched their sanctuary prove its worth. Aurelia collapsed, power draining from her in a rush that left her gasping. Strong arms caught her, 2 sets, vampire and wolf, holding her between them as the world spun. That, Keith said, voice shaking with residual power and terror, was the most reckless, brilliant, terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Agreed, Fenris managed. Also never do it again. My heart can't take it. Aurelia laughed weakly. No promises. But I think we just taught the Dominion to leave us alone. For now, Keith amended. They'll be back. With better weapons, better shields, better preparation. Then we'll face them together. She reached up, touching both their faces. The vampire, the wolf, and the star. 3 impossibilities that somehow fit. Fenris leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. You're terrifying and perfect, and I love you so much it actually hurts. I love you too, Aurelia whispered. Then, turning slightly, both of you. Equally. Impossibly. Forever. Keith's arms tightened around her. Forever is a very long time, Starlight. I hope you're prepared for how stubborn I can be. I've met your stubborn. I can handle it. They stayed there, in the ancient sanctuary, holding each other while the mountain settled and the pack celebrated victory above. 3 souls bound by cosmic design, learning that love didn't divide, it multiplied. That bridges were stronger than barriers. That sometimes the universe got it right, even when it seemed impossibly wrong. And somewhere in the void between stars, the Dominion marked Aurelia's location one final time, then erased it from their records. Some weapons were too dangerous to pursue. Some princesses too powerful to cage. And some loves too fierce to break. The weeks following the Dominion's retreat were strange and wonderful and complicated in ways Aurelia had never imagined. The pack celebrated their victory with a feast that lasted 3 days. Wolves who'd initially viewed her with suspicion now treated her as their salvation. The Alpha's mate who'd driven off an intergalactic threat with power that defied comprehension. Children brought her wildflowers. Warriors pledged their claws to her defense. Even the elders who'd grumbled about her vampire attachment grew grudgingly respectful. Keith remained the outsider, but a tolerated one. He kept to the shadows during pack gatherings, watching with ancient eyes as wolves danced and sang and celebrated life with the kind of abandoned vampires had forgotten millennia ago. But Aurelia caught him smiling sometimes, small, genuine expressions that transformed his severe features into something almost peaceful. And Fenris. Fenris was learning to share. It wasn't easy. His wolf still snarled every time Keith touched her, still demanded she spend nights in his arms rather than the vampire's. But he was trying. When she chose to sleep in Keith's chambers, Fenris didn't break down the door. When she kissed the vampire goodnight, the wolf didn't challenge him to combat. Progress, slow and painful, but progress nonetheless. You look thoughtful, Fenris said, appearing beside her on the stronghold's ramparts. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Regretting your choice to stay with 2 possessive idiots? Aurelia leaned against him, relishing his warmth. Never regretting. Just thinking about how strange my life has become. 6 months ago, I was fleeing across galaxies. Now I'm standing in a werewolf stronghold, bonded to 2 kings and apparently threatening enough that the Dominion decided I wasn't worth pursuing. You terrified them, Fenris said with obvious pride. Sent them running with their tails between their legs. It was magnificent. His arm came around her waist, pulling her closer. Though I aged several decades watching you channel that much power. My wolf was convinced you were going to burn yourself out. I almost did. She turned in his embrace, hands resting on his chest. But I had you and Keith anchoring me. The bonds kept me stable when the power should have consumed me. She paused. We make a good team. The three of us. Don't let the vampire hear you say that. His ego's insufferable enough without encouragement. I heard that, Wolf, Keith called from somewhere below. His hearing was, of course, supernatural. Fenris grinned, unrepentant. You were meant to. Aurelia shook her head, but couldn't suppress her smile. The bickering, the reluctant cooperation, the way they circled each other like wary allies rather than enemies, this was becoming normal. Their new reality. There's something I need to tell you both, she said quietly. Something I learned in the sanctuary that I haven't had the courage to share. Fenris's expression grew serious. What is it? Not here. In private. With Keith. She pulled away gently. Meet me in my chambers in 1 hour? He studied her face, reading concern in her features. Should I be worried? I don't know yet. She kissed him softly. But it affects all three of us, and you both deserve to know. An hour later, they gathered in her chambers, Aurelia on the bed, Fenris standing by the fire, Keith in his customary shadows. The tension was palpable. What did you see in the sanctuary? Keith asked without preamble. In the pool. You saw futures. Yes. Aurelia took a steadying breath. Multiple possible futures. Some good, most terrible. But there was something else. A vision of the past. Of what the celestial key was originally designed to do. Unite species, Fenris said. You told us this already. Not just unite them. Transform them. She met their eyes, one after the other. The architects didn't just want cooperation between species. They wanted to evolve them. Create something new by merging incompatible genetics through the key's bonds. Silence fell like a stone. You're saying, Keith said slowly, that bonding with you changes us? I'm saying it could change us. That the bonds we share aren't just emotional or magical, they're biological. Over time, vampire and werewolf traits might begin to merge. To create something that's never existed before. She wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know if it's already started. Don't know if it can be stopped. But you both deserve to know what you agreed to when you accepted these bonds. Fenris was the first to move. He crossed to the bed, sat beside her, took her hand. Does it hurt you? This potential transformation? No. If anything, I feel stronger. More stable. The bonds are adapting me just as I'm adapting you. Then I don't see the problem. He squeezed her hand gently. Wolf, vampire, or something entirely new, I'll still be me. Still love you. Still want you beside me until the stars burn out. Keith emerged from the shadows, expression unreadable. I've been a vampire for 4,000 years. It's not just what I am, it's who I am. The thought of losing that, of becoming something else. He trailed off, crimson eyes haunted. I understand, Aurelia said softly. If you want to break the blood bond, if this is too much. No. The word came out sharp, absolute. Keith knelt before her, taking her free hand in both of his. I've lived 4 millennia as a vampire. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've experienced every possible variation of immortal existence. And none of it compares to the 6 months I've spent loving you. His grip tightened. If bonding with you transforms me into something new, then so be it. I'd rather spend eternity as an unknown quantity with you than another 4,000 years as a vampire alone. Tears spilled down Aurelia's cheeks. You're sure? Starlight, I've never been more certain of anything. He rose, settling on her other side, completing the triangle. Though I reserve the right to complain extensively if I start sprouting fur. Fenris sparked a laugh. And I'll complain if I suddenly develop an aversion to sunlight. Fair's fair. The tension broke. Aurelia found herself laughing through her tears, overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of these two males who'd accepted cosmic transformation rather than lose her. I love you both so much, she managed. Even when you're being ridiculous. Especially when we're being ridiculous, Keith corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. It's our most endearing quality. Speak for yourself, vampire. I'm dignified at all times. You shifted into wolf form last week and chased your own tail for 15 minutes. That was a battle tactic. I was practicing evasive maneuvers. You were dizzy for an hour afterward. Aurelia dissolved into helpless laughter, the weight of her revelation lifting as they bickered. This was her life now, caught between two impossibly stubborn kings who somehow made the absurd feel normal. When the laughter faded, a comfortable silence settled over them. Keith's cool presence on her left, Fenris's warmth on her right, both bonds humming with contentment. "So what now?" Fenris asked eventually. "The Dominion's been driven off. We're all apparently slowly transforming into cosmic hybrids. Where do we go from here?" "Forward," Aurelia said simply. "We learn to navigate this life we've built. We figure out how three people share space and time and affection without destroying each other. We protect the pack and the territory and whatever else needs protecting." She paused. "And we try to be happy, despite the impossible circumstances." "I can work with that," Keith murmured. "Agreed." Fenris stood, pulling Aurelia up with him. "Though I'm claiming tonight, the vampires had you for the past 3 evenings." "I have not been counting," Keith said with obvious dignity. "You absolutely have been counting." "Well, yes, but I wasn't going to mention it." Aurelia looked between them, seeing the genuine affection beneath the bickering. They'd never be friends. Centuries of bad blood didn't evaporate overnight. But they were allies. Partners in the complicated endeavor of loving the same woman. "Keith," she said softly, "would you be terribly offended if I spent tonight with Fenris?" The vampire stood, shadows pulling close. "Offended? No. Jealous enough to contemplate arson? Perhaps." He cupped her face, kissed her with careful tenderness. "But I'm learning to live with jealousy. It's preferable to the alternative. Tomorrow night is yours," she promised. "All of it. No interruptions. I'll hold you to that, Starlight." He kissed her once more, then melted into shadows, returning to his own chambers. Alone with Fenris, Aurelia felt the mate bond settle into something deeper than contentment. Recognition. Belonging. Home. "You're staring again," Fenris said, echoing their first journey together. "Still observing. And what do you observe?" "That you're being remarkably patient about sharing me. That the wolf in you is probably screaming to claim me exclusively. That you're trying so hard to make this work it makes my heart ache." She stepped closer, hands sliding up his chest. "And that I'm incredibly grateful the moon goddess gave me someone strong enough to attempt the impossible." Fenris's arms came around her, holding her close. "The moon goddess gave me you. Everything else, the vampire, the complications, the cosmic transformations, that's just the price of admission. And you're worth any price, little star." He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of the passion he'd been restraining for Keith's sake. Aurelia melted into it, the mate bond singing with joy, her cosmic energy flaring bright enough to light the room. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Fenris rested his forehead against hers. "I love you. I love your impossible heart that's somehow big enough for 2 males. I love your courage and your power and the way you glow when you're happy. I love everything you are and everything you're becoming." "I love you too," Aurelia whispered. "My wolf. My alpha. My impossible fate." They spent the night wrapped in each other, the mate bond pulsing with contentment, while in the next wing of the stronghold, a vampire sat alone and tried not to count the hours until tomorrow. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Aurelia woke to urgent knocking, Fenris already on his feet and partially shifted before consciousness fully returned. "Alpha," a voice called through the door. "We have guests. A delegation. They're requesting an audience with the Celestial Key." Fenris and Aurelia exchanged glances. "What kind of delegation?" "Multiple species, Alpha. Witches, fae, even a dragon in human form. They're saying word has spread about the princess who united vampire and wolf. They want to witness it themselves." Aurelia's stomach sank. "So much for keeping a low profile. You channeled enough power to disable 6 warships," Fenris pointed out, pulling on clothes with efficient movements. "Low profile was never an option after that display." He paused. "Though I'm more concerned about why a dragon has decided to visit. They don't leave their territories lightly." They dressed quickly and descended to the Great Hall, where Keith was already waiting. The vampire looked alert despite the early hour, shadows pooling at his feet in defensive patterns. "The delegation?" Aurelia asked. "Waiting in the courtyard. I did a preliminary assessment. For witches, powerful ones, judging by their auras. 2 fey nobles from the summer and winter courts. And the dragon." He paused. "The dragon is Ignis Flameheart. Ancient, notoriously territorial, and not known for diplomatic visits." "Wonderful," Fenris muttered. "Just what we needed." Ancient beings with unclear motives. They stepped into the courtyard together, presenting a united front. The delegation turned as one, and Aurelia felt the weight of their scrutiny. The dragon spoke first. In human form, he appeared as a distinguished male with copper skin and eyes that burned with literal fire. "Princess Aurelia of Celestra. I am Ignis Flameheart, and I come bearing a message from the supernatural conclave." "I wasn't aware there was a conclave," Keith said dryly. "There wasn't. We formed it specifically to address you three." Ignis's burning gaze swept over them. A vampire and a werewolf, natural enemies for millennia, united through bonds to a star-born princess. "You've accomplished what we thought impossible. What many of us have spent centuries trying to prevent." "Prevent?" Aurelia felt Fenris tense beside her. "Why would you want to prevent unity?" One of the witches stepped forward, the same Isadora who'd given her the repository crystal. "Because unity threatens the existing power structures. If vampires and werewolves can coexist, what's to stop other species from demanding the same? The old treaties, the territorial boundaries, the careful balance we've maintained for thousands of years, all of it becomes obsolete." "You're not here to congratulate us," Keith said flatly. "You're here to threaten us." "We're here," Ignis corrected, "to offer a choice. Join the conclave. Help us reshape supernatural society into something that allows for cooperation rather than endless conflict. Share what you've learned about bridging impossible divides." He paused, flames flickering in his eyes. "Or refuse, and watch as the established powers move to eliminate the threat you represent." The threat hung in the air like a blade. Fenris's wolf pushed forward, golden eyes blazing. "You dare come to my territory and threaten my mate?" "I dare come here and offer you an opportunity to change the world," Ignis replied calmly. "But make no mistake, you've already changed it simply by existing. The question is whether that change will be controlled, guided, shaped into something beneficial, or whether it will tear apart centuries of careful diplomacy and plunge our species into war." Aurelia stepped forward, placing a hand on Fenris's chest to calm him. Her cosmic energy flared, bright enough to make several delegates step back. "You're asking us to become symbols. Representatives of a new way forward." "We're asking you to lead," Isadora said. "To show others that the bonds you share, impossible as they seem, can work. That vampire and wolf and star can coexist without destroying each other." "And if we refuse?" Keith asked. "Then you'll spend eternity looking over your shoulders, waiting for those who fear change to strike." The dragon's expression softened fractionally. "I don't want to be your enemy, princess. None of us do. But the world is watching. They've seen your power, seen your bonds. What you do next will determine whether supernatural society evolves or fractures." Aurelia looked at Fenris, then at Keith. Through both bonds, she felt their reluctance, their suspicion, their desire to simply exist without the weight of political maneuvering. But she also felt their love for her. Their willingness to do whatever it took to keep her safe. "We'll need time to discuss this," she said carefully. "Among ourselves. This isn't a decision I can make alone." "Of course." Ignis inclined his head. "You have 1 week. Then the conclave reconvenes, with or without your participation. Choose wisely, Celestial Key. The future of multiple species may depend on it." The delegation departed, leaving the three of them standing in the courtyard as morning sun crested the mountains. "Well," Keith said eventually. "That was ominous." "Incredibly ominous," Fenris agreed. "Also presumptuous. Who made them arbiters of supernatural politics? Probably the same people who've been running things for millennia while the rest of us fought over territory and old grudges." Aurelia leaned against Keith, exhausted despite the early hour. "They're not entirely wrong, though. We have changed things. The question is what we do with that change." "What do you want to do?" Fenris asked, watching her carefully. She thought about the visions in the sanctuary pool. The possible futures where cooperation triumphed over conflict. Where species that had been enemies for millennia learned to coexist. Where love, complicated, messy, impossible love, became the bridge that transformed everything. I want to try, she said quietly. Not because they're forcing us, but because maybe we can help others find what we've found. Maybe our impossible bonds can show people there's another way. Then we try, Keith said, pressing a kiss to her hair. Though I reserve the right to be extremely suspicious of everyone involved. Seconded, Fenris added. We'll join their conclave, share our experience, and probably regret it immensely. But we'll do it together. Together, Aurelia echoed, feeling both bonds pulse with agreement. They didn't know if they'd succeed. Didn't know if love and cooperation could really reshape supernatural society. But they'd already accomplished the impossible once. What was one more miracle among friends? The conclave convened in neutral territory, an ancient fortress built on the border between vampire and werewolf lands, where magic from a dozen species layered thick enough to taste. Aurelia stood between Keith and Fenris, facing a semicircle of the most powerful beings in the supernatural world. Dragons, fey nobility, witch matriarchs, vampire elders, werewolf alphas from territories spanning continents. All of them watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. This is a mistake, Keith murmured through the blood bond, too quiet for others to hear. Half these people want us dead. The other half want to study us like lab specimens. Probably true, Aurelia admitted silently. But we committed to trying. Ignis Flameheart rose from his seat, flames dancing across his shoulders in an impressive display. We are gathered to witness the impossible. 3 beings, vampire, werewolf, and starborn, united through bonds that should not exist. They claim their connection can serve as a model for broader cooperation among our species. He gestured toward them. Princess Aurelia, would you care to demonstrate? Demonstrate. Fenris's wolf pushed forward, suspicious. What exactly are you asking? Show us the bonds, a fey noble called out, her voice like crystalline bells. Prove they're real and not some elaborate deception. Aurelia felt both males tense beside her, their protective instincts flaring. Through the bonds, she sent waves of calm, of reassurance. It's all right. Let them see. She reached deep into both connections, the blood bond with Keith and the mate bond with Fenris, and pulled them to the surface. Her cosmic energy flared, illuminating the threads of magic that connected all 3 of them. Crimson shadow wove through golden moonlight, both spiraling around her starfire in patterns that defied natural law. The assembled supernatural leaders leaned forward, fascinated and horrified in equal measure. Impossible, an ancient vampire whispered. The blood bond should have consumed her, turned her into a thrall, or killed her outright. The mate bond should have rejected the vampire connection, a grizzled werewolf alpha added. These magics are fundamentally incompatible. And yet they coexist, Isadora said, satisfaction evident in her voice. Because the celestial key was designed to bridge such incompatibilities. To prove that what we consider immutable natural law is merely inconvenient. A young witch in the back stood abruptly. I have a question. For the princess. She waited until Aurelia nodded. Do you love them equally? Or is one bond stronger than the other? The question hung in the air. Aurelia felt both Keith and Fenris waiting for her answer, felt their vulnerability despite their powerful exteriors. I love them differently, she said carefully. Keith is my savior, my anchor, the one who taught me that survival can be more than just existing. He's patience and ancient wisdom and the kind of devotion that spans millennia. She turned slightly. Fenris is my destiny, my challenge, the one who showed me that fate can be accepted without surrendering choice. He's passion and present moment intensity and the kind of love that burns bright enough to rival suns. She looked out at the assembled crowd. They're not interchangeable. They're not competing for the same space in my heart. They each fill spaces I didn't know were empty, and together, the 3 of us create something none of us could build alone. Pretty words, a scarred vampire elder said dismissively. But how does it work practically? Who leads? Who submits? Who claims precedence when decisions must be made? We discuss, Keith said, voice carrying the weight of 4,000 years. We negotiate. We sometimes argue quite passionately. But we decide together or not at all. Even when your instincts scream otherwise, another alpha challenged. Even when your wolf demands dominance? Especially then, Fenris replied. Because my wolf is smart enough to know that losing Aurelia would be worse than sharing her. That pride is cold comfort when you're alone. He paused. And because she's not property to be owned or territory to be claimed. She's our partner, our equal, our mate and bonded both, Keith finished. Which means respecting her autonomy even when it conflicts with our possessive instincts. A young werewolf female stood, tears streaming down her face. I'm bonded to a vampire, she said, voice shaking. Have been for 3 years. We hide it because our pacts and covens would tear us apart if they knew. But you, she looked at them with desperate hope. You're not hiding. You're showing everyone it's possible. I love a wolf, a vampire male added, standing beside the female. She's my entire world. But we can't tell anyone. Can't claim each other publicly. Can't, his voice broke. Can't be what you three are. Free. More stood. A witch bonded to a fae. A dragon who'd fallen for a human. A dozen different impossible combinations, all hidden, all suffering in silence, because supernatural society demanded they choose between love and acceptance. Aurelia felt tears burning her eyes. You're not alone, she said, cosmic energy pulsing with emotion. You were never alone. We just didn't know about each other. Ignis surveyed the room, flame subdued. It seems, he said quietly, that the celestial key has already united more than just vampire and wolf. She's revealed fractures in our society we've been pretending don't exist. The question, Isadora added, is what we do with this revelation. Do we continue enforcing boundaries that cause suffering? Or do we evolve? Evolution is dangerous, an elderly witch warned. It disrupts the natural order. Creates chaos. The natural order, Keith said, shadows writhing around him with barely contained fury, has kept me alone for 4,000 years. Has forced lovers to hide. Has perpetuated wars between species that could be allies. If that's natural order, then chaos is preferable. Agreed, Fenris growled. I've spent 3 centuries fighting battles that served no purpose beyond maintaining territorial boundaries drawn by dead alphas. I'm done perpetuating suffering in the name of tradition. Then what do you propose? A Fey noble asked. How do we restructure millennia of society? Slowly, Aurelia said. Carefully. Starting with recognition that bonds between species are valid, not abominations. That love doesn't weaken us, it strengthens us by building bridges where walls once stood. She looked at the hidden lovers scattered throughout the room. We create safe spaces where people can exist openly. We establish protections against persecution. We show that cooperation is possible without erasing what makes each species unique. And if violence erupts from those who resist change, a practical-minded vampire asked. Then we defend those who need defending, Keith said simply. The 3 of us didn't survive the Dominion by hiding. We fought. Together. Using combined strengths that shouldn't exist but do. You're asking us to gamble supernatural stability on the hope that others can replicate your success, the scarred vampire elder said. What if they can't? What if most cross-species bonds end in disaster? Then they end, Aurelia said firmly. But that should be their choice to make, not ours. We don't ban love because it might fail. We support people through failures and celebrate successes. The debate raged for hours. Traditionalists argued for maintaining barriers. Progressives pushed for immediate acceptance of all bonds. Pragmatists sought compromise. But slowly, painfully slowly, consensus began to form. The hidden lovers would be protected. Persecution would be prohibited. Territories would establish zones where cross-species relationships could flourish without threat. And the conclave itself would transform from a crisis response into a permanent governing body promoting cooperation. It wasn't perfect. It didn't solve everything. But it was a start. As the sun set and the assembly finally dismissed, Aurelia found herself surrounded by people seeking advice, offering thanks, sharing their own impossible stories. Keith and Fenris stayed close, protective but no longer defensive, watching their mate inspire change through simply existing. "We did it," Fenris murmured as they finally escaped to their temporary quarters. "Actually changed supernatural society's direction." "We started something," Keith corrected. "Whether it succeeds long-term remains to be seen." He pulled Aurelia into his arms, breathing in her scent. "But for now, we've given hope to people who'd lost it. That's worth the vulnerability of exposing ourselves to political scrutiny." Aurelia leaned against him, exhausted but satisfied. "I'm proud of us. All three of us. For being brave enough to stand in front of the world and say, this is real, this is valid, this is worth protecting." "I'd do it again," Fenris said, settling on her other side. "Every difficult moment. Every compromise. Every time my wolf screamed to claim you exclusively." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Because you were right, little star. Love multiplies rather than divides. I love you more for watching you love him somehow." "Careful, Wolf," Keith said dryly. "You're dangerously close to admitting you don't hate me." "I still hate you. I just hate the idea of losing her more." "I'll take it." They sat in comfortable silence, bonds humming with contentment, until a knock interrupted their peace. Isadora entered without waiting for permission, because witches rarely bothered with courtesy. "Congratulations. You've appended thousands of years of supernatural politics in a single afternoon. I'm impressed. Was there something you needed?" Aurelia asked, too tired for witch games. "Information. Specifically about the transformation you mentioned. The biological changes the bonds are creating." Isadora's expression turned serious. "Because I've been studying your magical signatures, and the evolution is accelerating. Within a decade, maybe less, you'll be something entirely new. Not vampire, not werewolf, not even fully starborn. Something the universe has never seen." Keith tensed. "And the implications?" "Unknown. Potentially revolutionary. You could be the first of a new species, one capable of wielding multiple magical systems simultaneously. Or you could be a dead end, a genetic experiment that doesn't survive its own transformation." She shrugged. "Either way, you're making history. Thought you should know." She left as abruptly as she'd arrived. "Well," Fenris said eventually. "That was ominous." "Everything about our existence is ominous," Keith pointed out. At this point, potential genetic transformation barely registers on the crisis scale. Aurelia laughed, helpless, slightly hysterical laughter that made both males look at her with concern. "We're being transformed into a new species. The supernatural world is restructuring around us. The Dominion might return at any moment. And I'm sitting here thinking the most stressful part of my day was choosing which of you to have breakfast with. It's always the small decisions that matter most," Keith said wisely. "Then, though for the record, you've had breakfast with the wolf 4 times this week. I'm keeping count." "You're always keeping count. Someone has to maintain standards." Fenris threw a pillow at him. Keith caught it with one hand, threw it back. Within seconds, they were engaged in a full pillow war, supernatural speed making projectiles blur. Aurelia watched, laughing, as 2 ancient kings acted like children. This was her life. Impossible, complicated, occasionally absurd, but undeniably hers. When the pillow fight ended, Keith victorious through centuries of combat experience, they collapsed together in a tangled heap of limbs and laughter. "I love you both so much," Aurelia said, cosmic energy glowing softly. "Even when you're ridiculous. Especially when you're ridiculous." "Good," Fenris murmured, pulling her closer. "Because ridiculous is pretty much our default state at this point. Speak for yourself, Wolf." "I'm dignified." "You literally just won a pillow fight using vampire speed. Dignified pillow combat. There's a difference." Aurelia closed her eyes, feeling the dual pull of bonds that had rewritten her destiny. She didn't know what the future held: transformation, new species, continued political upheaval. But she knew she'd face it with these 2 males beside her. The vampire who'd saved her from the void. The wolf who'd claimed her despite impossible odds. And the love they'd built together, messy, complicated, and absolutely perfect. The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.